Welcome to tonight's episode of Ask Mrs. Schrader. Tonight I wanted to address one of the questions that has been coming up quite a bit lately, and that is, what goes on my note cards? So to do this, I want to go ahead and click into my project. So I'm clicking on Paleo Diet because that was the title of my project, and it brings me to my dashboard. And the reason that I wanted to do that was I wanted to draw attention to your thesis statement. Now everybody should have their thesis statement in their dashboard on Noodle Tools at this time. So to demonstrate what goes on your note cards, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that thesis statement and I'm going to paste it into a Word document so that we can do some color coding here. So remember, my thesis statement is my subject, which is the paleo diet. My direction is that it is bad for your health, and then I have the 3 thesis points that prove that the paleo diet is bad for your health. So I have the lack of carbs can lead to hypothyroidism, the undesirable foods can lead to binge eating, and the lack of dairy decreases bone mass. So those are my 3 things that I'm using to prove that the paleo diet is bad for your health. So let's jump down here. You're going to have 4, possibly 5 different note card categories. So let's come back here to my Noodle Tools, and if you look here at my note cards, you'll see that I in fact have 5 different categories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different categories of my note cards. And I did that like this. First, you'll probably have 1 or 2 note cards for your attention grabber. You'll also probably have 3 to 4 note cards for your background information. And then you're going to have note cards for each of your thesis points. So one of my category of note cards will be hypothyroidism. One of my category of note cards will be binge eating. And one of my category of note cards will be dairy, lack of dairy. So like I said, you'll probably have about 2 note cards for your attention grabber, probably have about 3 note cards for your background, probably you have to have 4 for each of your thesis points. Now you can have more here if you find more facts, but remember, in our outline for each of our thesis points, you have to have 3 pieces of evidence to back up each thesis point. So I'm just telling you that you need to have at least 4 in there to ensure that you have 3 good pieces of evidence. So in other words, I have to have 3 good pieces of evidence that the paleo diet, that the lack of carbs leads to hypothyroidism. I have to have 3 good pieces of evidence that the undesirable foods can actually lead to binge eating. And I have to have 3 good pieces of evidence that the lack of dairy decreases bone mass. So if you're looking for a number of note cards, this is a really good reference. So 2 attention grabber, 3 background, and then 4 for each of your thesis points. So those are the only categories of note cards that I can actually have. So let's go over here and let's find a source to possibly look at to see what kind of notes I might take. So when I'm in my source, remember I have a source that I want, so I already was in my Noodle Tools, already up here in the Bibliography tab, so I'm ready to actually take a note from that source. So once I go and scan that source, once I find something that I want to do, remember, I can only take notes over something that would be a good attention grabber, background information, hypothyroidism, binge eating, or lack of dairy. So some things I might do to make sure that happens is do a Command F for find, and I might just search for dairy, and it's going to give me some of those. So those might be good facts that I want to use for a note card. Remember, the facts, you're going to eventually cite that I got this fact from this reliable source. So even though this might be information that you already knew, somebody's more likely to believe it if they see that you got it from a reliable source rather than if you just said it yourself. Another issue that people have been struggling with coming up with their facts for their note cards is their researching isn't narrow enough. So to show that, I'm going to come back here to my noodle tools, and in my note cards I see that I'm good here for my hypothyroidism cards probably, but I really am lacking in my dairy and binge eating. So one thing that I might do is just do a Google search of binge eating from dieting. So I'm not even mentioning the paleo diet, but I knew from another source that binge eating is going to happen because of a paleo diet. So I can just kind of broaden my search to just binge eating in general from dieting and find sources that way. So again, this is WebMD, so it's going to be a reliable source. And I can search here, and from this article I can see that the summary is kind of that when you're dieting, your body craves things that it knows that it can't have. So that might be a note card that I want to put in there. So I hope that clears up some confusion about what you are supposed to be taking your note cards. Remember, everything always goes back to your thesis statement. So what am I trying to prove in my paper? Because eventually, when you start to make your outline in Noodle Tools, you'll see that for each of your body paragraphs, so my first body paragraphs is my lack of carbs, you have to have at least 3 pieces of evidence. But that's also where you'll bring in, if you have 5 note cards there, that's fine. You just need to make sure that you have 3 individual pieces of evidence. So again, I hope that clears things up, and now you should be ready to take some good notes on all of your note cards.